Hello, coaches, and welcome to this edition of Give and Go Live. I'm joined by the Director of Coaching Education for United Soccer Coaches, Ian Barker. Hello, Ian.
Hello, David. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks for being here, Ian. And today's session is a defending focus activity, specifically looking at the 1-3-5-2. And as we'll see in a second, as we move into the first slide, that we have our players set up in a numbered system.
Yeah, and so again, we're trying to develop from our formation of 3-5-2. So for the purposes of this, a 5v5 makes a ton of sense. And you can see here our traditional numbering system, 2 and 4, 6, 8 and 9. So you would arrange the players based on how they maybe interact with each other in the game. So you'd put some intentionality into where the players stack up in terms of the blue and the red team. Coach has a good supply of balls. There is a halfway line, which is going to be very important as we develop through the training session. And the first game condition for the players is that in order to score a legitimate goal, at least 3 of the players must be in the attacking team's half. And so the idea here is a very front foot offensive attitude that David will explain a little bit further here in terms of the detail of the session.
So let's talk a little bit about why this is relevant to the 1-3-5-2 specifically. If we look at the numbering, we have our number 2 and our number 4, our defenders, our 4 playing central defender and our number 2 likely to be our right-sided defender. Then we have our number 6, our central holding midfield player out of the 3. And traditionally, I like to play 1 holding, 2 more attacking minded. So one of the attacking minded players is our number 8. And then we have our central striker, number 9. So here we're working in a relatively narrow area from across the field, and it's involving the players that are playing in the center of the park. And the whole focus of this activity is, can we make recovery runs into good positions to slow down the attack and keep compact? So you'll see that the transitional moment is when a goal is scored, the 8 and 9, wherever they are on the field, must make recovery runs around the goal before they re-enter the field.
And what I like about that, David, is a simple condition, but it allows the game to continue. So what we see now is the importance of the halfway line, because the 2, the 4, and the 6, who are momentarily disadvantaged numerically, have recovered to a deep position, waiting for 8 and 9 to come and join them into an effective defensive shape. At the same time, the blue team, appreciating the opportunity, they're going to be very front foot because they have a numerical advantage. So that's all good. A couple of things for coaches. You can see these sort of handball sized goals we've used. We certainly don't want to use goalkeepers because we don't need the goalkeepers in this particular session. Now, whether you make penetration to an end zone, to a goal, maybe to a target player, that's for the coach, but we've used small-sided goals here. The other thing is, if there are natural markings on the field, maybe a small penalty box or some other natural markings, they can provide a reference point for the player. So certainly the halfway line is a clear part of the setup that provides that reference point, and that should absolutely be part of the effective setup.
And Ian, one of the things I really like about the fact that we don't have goalkeepers, and it's certainly intentional, is that we really have to defend solidly and with a lot of enthusiasm. So for the purpose of this activity, without a goalkeeper, our number 2, 4, and 6 have to put pressure on the ball because, of course, they don't want to concede. Knowing, however, that the team has to have at least 3 players over the halfway line to score. So they can tactically work out, do they put high pressure on and try and win the ball back immediately, or do they drop off and allow their players to get back and help defend? And in this case, of course, they have done exactly that. They've dropped back to the halfway line, and then they start applying pressure as the players start to approach and go over the halfway line. And what I would be looking at from a perspective of the 1-3-5-2 is that how are the number 9 and how are the number 8 players making their recovery runs? Are they making their recovery runs to the player carrying the ball? Are they making their recovery runs to a player that seems to be open? Are they making the runs just towards the goal in order to try and get in a goal side position? So where they make their runs, how they make them in terms of is it a straight run or bent run becomes very relevant as we start to look at systems of play and how specifically a coach wants to implement their strategies.
David, could you talk a little bit about maybe the recovery run relative to the proximity of goal of the attacker? Because it just occurs to me, sometimes we may have to make a beeline to the attacker, and other times we may be able to get deep first. So can you talk about that in terms of distance to goal and other threat?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that's really important when you're making a recovery run is, does the player that has the ball, are they receiving any type of pressure? Because in this case, as we can see here, the number 6 is applying pressure to the opponent number 6 who has the ball. So is it wise for our number 8 to apply pressure from behind or get in front and help double team this one player? Or what I would think is a little bit more relevant here is, can this number 8 get back and try and support wider and alleviate some of the threat that's coming from the number 4 that is in open space? So different strategies that coaches may employ. There's not a right or wrong answer. Obviously, the wrong answer would be if the number 4 was free and then ended up scoring without any pressure. That would obviously end up being the wrong answer.
Okay, thank you very much. And so really just in terms of an understanding of what's going on the screen now, once the red team has got this activity done, or indeed both teams, and they become effective at recovery defending as a group of 5, hopefully that effectiveness means we win the ball, and then the moment of transition, because we've set the game up in a back and forth. So what we don't want to do is kind of stop the activity every 30 seconds for the coach. This should be a pretty free flow activity where we can see multiple opportunities for recovery, very engaged kids, and should a ball go in the goal or off the field, again, the coach is there with a good supply of balls to keep it going. So we'll just talk a little bit about these moments of transition.
And one of the things I really like about this particular type of activity, Ian, is we can set up both teams in exactly the same system, and we can work the strategies and decision making with both teams. So that's one of the nice things about this activity is everyone's set up with the same numbering and the same objectives. And as you mentioned here, we've got a transitional moment for the Reds who've won the ball. They've worked very hard to firstly recover and then break into transition. And we've caught the blue team a little bit flat-footed because we've managed to get in behind. And the number 8, having broken forward, has dribbled past, magnificent chipped cross in what seems to be a very short area here. And the number 9 has got on the end of it, and she scored bottom corner. So I think all in all, this activity provides everything that we possibly could want in an activity that is trying to teach players to recover, but functionally based on the position they play on the field.
Yeah, and obviously, I think if you choose to play a different formation, clearly you can manipulate the numbers of players and the types of players and their relationships to each other to reflect your choice of playing with 4 in the back or 4 in the midfield or whatever your particular formation that becomes a system is. So I think this 5v5 makes a load of sense when we're talking about a 3-5-2.
And then just before we conclude, one thing that just comes to mind, looking at the diagram here, we've got the number 4 chasing back. And this goes back to my previous point, is where do you want the recovery run to be made? In this occasion, the number 4 has chased after the opponent's number 8 and never managed to catch up. Maybe if they'd have cut inside, they would have had an opportunity to apply some pressure and stop the cross.
Sure.
Well, coaches, thank you for joining us on this edition of Give and Go Live. Until the next time, have a good week.